Welcome and thank you for tuning into this episode of Evidently You're Unaware. I am your host, Andrea, also known as the Successful Diva. I look forward to sharing with you what is coming on deck for your learning, your awareness, and the elevation of your consciousness. Evidently, You're Unaware is a platform dedicated to shining light on various issues, topics, circumstances, and people who influence our lives. The content to be delivered is designed to bring relevant, thought-provoking discussions, not only into your peripheral view, but also into your central vision. These are things you're probably discussing. If you're not discussing it, you're hearing about it and you might want to know a little bit more. And I am here to help you do exactly that. So let's get smarter. This is something that you want to pay attention to. Unless you were born yesterday, there is a high probability that you have heard the term Project 2025, the 922-page document officially titled Mandate for Leadership. The conservative promise became widely talked about after it was first published in April 2023 by the Heritage Foundation. That's a name you're probably aware of. However, this mandate for leadership is not your ordinary class project. I won't bore you with the particulars on the author, its contributors, and all the other things that come, in the table of contents, etc., because that's not really what your attention should be on. What it should be on is that the document has been dubbed as the conservative blueprint for the second administration of the now 47th president of the United States. It outlines a multi-pronged approach. It's a roadmap on an extensive overhaul of the executive branch and the agencies which help our nation function. As the document, and more importantly, the contents on the pages within it, became known, there were several things that began to clash all at one time with this document. Number one, those directly affiliated with or having knowledge of it began to distance themselves from it. They wanted nothing to do with it. Number two, the staunch supporters of the then 45th president, wanting him to become the 47th president, they flat out denied it. And even if they were aware of it, they thought he, meaning the 47th president, he could never do anything close to what was being described in the document. And then number three, here's the third thing that was happening all at the same time. You got those who knew about it, tried to distance themselves. You had the supporters of the now 47th president. They just were like, no, just flat out can't be happening. Then there were these people. Number three, the staunch opposers of the document who tried to sound the alarm prior to the November 2024 general election, only to be ignored by the 77,303,573 people who voted for the now 47th president. And let's not forget the 89,278,948 people who did not vote at all. Thus, in essence, they voted for the same individual in absentia. So, in the words of Theodore Roosevelt, in any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing is the wrong thing. And the worst thing you can do is absolutely nothing. Well, here we are, 65 days and counting into this current administration. And I think it's evident what has happened. I'm going to go right on back. Number one, those who tried to distance themselves from the project not only knew of it, but they stood back and stood by in lockstep, awaiting and on ready notice to implement the extreme initiatives contained on the pages. The staunch supporters, well, they're kind of starting to realize that their vote for, let's just say, border control and the lower cost of eggs actually has gone towards mass deportation and tariffs. And then there were the staunch, and still are, the staunch opposers. And I'll just say, they're looking at the staunch supporters going, we told y'all. That is what has happened. So evidently, after all of that, and the number of days we've entered into this administration, there are some who still, imagine that, still are unaware of what has been spelled out on the pages of this document. So for some who have not read the 900 plus page document, I'm not going to do that for you. And I know you're probably saying, my gosh, we'd be here all day and all night. I'm not going to do that, but I am going to let us listen to, please take a listen to House Representative Jasmine Crockett, who represents Texas's 30th district. She's going to share a forecast on the project's impact. This was way back. She shared a forecast. And once we're done with Jasmine, I'm going to come back and share with you an up close glance, like just a glance. We're not going to go page by page, glance at the project itself. So let's take a look at Jasmine Crockett.
The fact that we have Americans that are waking up and saying, wait a minute, are you saying that tariffs are going to negatively impact me? Are you saying that we're going to have to pay for this? It's kind of like that wall that we're still waiting on Mexico to build, right? That they're going to pay for it. No, we're going to pay for it. We're going to be the ones that are suffering. And for those that thought that inflation was bad, even though it has come down, even though that it is honestly, cooled off here a lot quicker than it cooled off in the rest of the world, let me just tell you, it's time to buckle up, Buttercup, because it is about to be on and popping if for some reason he gets half of this done. And right now, looking at the henchmen that he is trying to put into his administration, we are on track to see a lot of these negative things impact our economy.
Well, in the words of Jasmine Crockett, buckle up, Buttercup, because this thing is happening. And I believe you are now somewhat aware of what's happening in this project and throughout this mandate. So I promised a glance at the project, and here we go. At the time that the project began, you may not have been aware, and I mentioned earlier in the onset of this episode that this is a multi-pronged roadmap to an extensive overhaul of the executive branch and the agencies that are central to our nation's function. And so here are the prongs. Number one, you'll see it there. I'm just going to work myself from left to right. Taking on the reins of the government, the common defense, the general welfare, the economy, and the independent regulatory agencies. Those are the multi-prongs. Don't take my word for it. Actually, go look at the document. You'll see its website there in the bottom corner of this screen. project2025.org/playbook. Ultimately, it's right there in the pages. They outline the prongs for which the attacks will occur. And then underneath each of those headings are the subcategories, shall I say, for which the destruction is to occur. And so I'm just going to go right from the left, not going to read all of them, because I think after you either hear this for the first time, for those who may be catching it somewhere later in the week, I don't know, but ultimately take your time and read through this. Taking the reins of the government, White House, the executive office of the POTUS, President of the United States, central personnel agencies, managing the bureaucracy, the common defense. The attacks would go on the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of State, intelligence community, media agencies, the Agency for International Development. And I can go on and on. I won't take the time literally to do this, but I wanted to give you this view of what has been on the pages spelled out in plain English throughout this mandate, which I can tell you is not your ordinary class project. Each day, the action items from the pages of the project unfold. And because so much seemingly is happening simultaneously, tracking the project's movement could be challenging. As quickly as the initiatives are introduced, some by executive order, some not, the measure is challenged and taken to court. But think about it. That's the point, right? While lawyers are tied up in court, other extreme components are occurring and being initiated, and something's happening. And while we're still looking at this, they're over there with that. And everything just starts all over again. And now we got a whole new news cycle. So I'm here to share with you. I'm glad you're here too, because you may be wondering, well, how do we track it? How does that happen? And I knew some people may or may not be aware, and that's why we're talking about it today. There's good news and there's bad news. The good news is there's a tracker for that. The bad news is there's a tracker for that. And so I am here today to introduce you to what could be new to some, could be old to others, but I'm going to introduce it to you today. And that is the Project 2025 tracker. The Project 2025 .observer. That's www.project2025.observer. And what you'll see here on the screen, which was originally started as a passion project by two Redditors, has grown into a community-driven resource that provides transparency for public understanding of the current administration's autocratic movement. So let's look at it. I know that once this is over, you're going to take time. You'll probably highlight and put it on your favorites list so you can track it as well. But what's happening here is the Reddits have decided they're going to make it known. They're going to do the work, track it. We can come here and find out what is going on. And ultimately, it breaks down each of those prongs that I just reviewed with you, and it tracks it. So when you see here, this is the initial splash page of the site, and it breaks down all the progress by agency. You, if you choose, can look at specific agencies simply by clicking on a select agency: CDC, Centers for Medicaid and Medicare. Here's the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Agriculture, Commerce. I could go on and on. Right now, I just have it in the overview, and you can see here's USAID. There were 6 objectives for USAID under attack. This administration has completed 100% of those objectives, according to this tracker. If you want to dive in deeper into what those objectives were or are, I guess I should say were, since they're already completed, the tracker will tell you they wanted to prioritize funding for faith-based organizations. They wanted to cut the budget of USAID, rescind USAID policies, cut international disaster assistance funding programs in Yemen, Syria, and Afghanistan, prohibit USAID from funding sexual reproductive health and reproductive rights and gender equality, and then eliminate Chief Diversity Officer at USAID, remove DEI requirements, eliminate funding discriminatory DEI practices. All 6 of them are now marked green and completed. You can drill down into any of this. The Department of State, 9 objectives, 89% of that as of today have been completed. And this is as of the day of this particular episode, and in which may be old by the time you go and look at it a little bit later. But other than this, as I'm showing you as I am airing this episode today. When you scroll down, you look at some of the other detailed project objectives, as a whole, you can go through a list of them. You can load more. I won't do that for you. I trust that with the information, your knowledge and your awareness is now elevated. You will go and do some of your research, because the Redditors have guided us to them, and I'm guiding you to them. But ultimately, you can see here on the tracker, 297 objectives were outlined in the mandate. 87 of them are done. 42 are like somewhere in progress, could be held up in courts, etc., but they're in progress. And you can also check by status. So if you just wanted to see which ones are still in progress, and you can see that here they are, the ones that are in progress: CDC, CFTC, CFPB. This is a big one, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which ultimately gives us the opportunity to not have all of the fees that we get charged. But nonetheless, they're attacking it, and it's in progress right now. So we've got to be watchful, careful, and do our due diligence. But this is the tracker. So the good news, there's a tracker. The bad news, there's a tracker. So I look forward to hearing your comments on what it is that you've seen in this tracker and the ultimate things that still may yet be done. I realize there are things that they may get halted, not completed at all. That's going to be great. But ultimately for us, we cannot be susceptible, I should say. We cannot be susceptible to wondering, waiting. It's our due diligence to find out what we can do. And there are going to be things we can't, but we have to put the power in our own hands. So thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Evidently You're Unaware. Remember, it is no longer acceptable or safe to live in ignorance. I don't want that tracker to scare you, but you cannot pretend or, sing your la la tune and make it go away. It's not going away. And we have to be aware of what's happening so that we understand what our steps may be to protect ourselves and our loved ones. So this information, again, is provided for your awareness and to elevate your consciousness in the particular areas, is particularly around decisions that may impact your life and the life of others. So don't forget, comment. Let me know. Maybe some of you have used this tracker. Maybe you're tracking in some other way with some other form. If you know of that, share it. My viewers may want to know of other means and ways to track what is going on in this administration so that they can speak with their respective duly elected legislators in hoping that they will gain whatever spine that's necessary to stand up to what is happening, because like it or not, we are all experiencing these unconventional and deliberate attacks on our democracy together. We're all in it together. So don't forget, subscribe to, if you have not yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do that at Evidently You're Unaware. And then follow me on, you'll find me, Andrea, at thesuccessfuldiva.bsky.com. Social. That is on Blue Sky at thesuccessfuldiva.bsky.social. Thank you so very much for tuning in. God bless.
Evidently, You're Unaware is a platform dedicated to shining light upon various issues, topics, circumstances, and people who influence our lives. The information provided should not be considered advice for legal, health, investments, or the endorsement of an individual or group. Neither the host nor the guest of Evidently, You're Unaware is responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from using the information shared within this podcast. All rights reserved. Copyright 2025. Evidently, You're Unaware.